Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for this opportunity to share. I was hiking in a remote rainforest in Indonesia when I fell 30 feet into a pit. I felt like I'd been hit by a car going 60 miles an hour. Without skipping a beat, a man from that part of Indonesia scaled the rock face to the bottom of the pit and knelt down beside me. As I went in and out of shock, he scooped me up into his arms and then bench pressed me onto the rock jutting out above us. Then he climbed up. Then he bench pressed me onto the next rock. Then he climbed up. Again and again and again. It's been 7 years since then, and so many people have played a part in my healing. After 2 surgeries, time in a wheelchair, years of physical therapy, and some ongoing symptoms of post-traumatic stress, there's one thing I know more deeply than I ever knew it before. No one gets out of a deep pit on their own. For the past 40 years, I've had the privilege of walking alongside individuals emerging from the deep pits of trauma and the results of trauma, like homelessness, addiction, anxiety, and depression. I also know how it feels firsthand to be in a pit of depression, and I'm guessing some of you do too. Here in Seattle, the need for more affordable housing is painfully obvious. But there are at least 4 other responses desperately needed if we are to help lift people out of the pits of trauma and the results of trauma. I think of those 4 other responses that would help lift people out of those pits as rocks. The first rock is prevention in all its forms. The second rock is a healthcare system that truly views physical health and mental health as 2 sides of the very same coin. Everyone needs access to both physical and mental health care. Everyone. The third rock is treatment available to all, like emergency rooms. And the fourth rock is ongoing, authentic community. I'd like to focus on that fourth rock and describe what that looks like in our recovery cafes. Authentic community is the place where we are both deeply known and deeply loved. I think you'd agree that being deeply known without being loved can be terrifying. And being deeply loved without being known sounds a little bit like an obsession to me. Certainly will not bring healing and transformation. We all need to be both deeply known and deeply loved. A newcomer to our cafe, on her very first day, shared in one of our small groups we call Recovery Circles. She shared, every morning at 9 a.m. for the past 15 years, I've met my dealer. Without skipping a beat, an older member responded, "It's okay. But tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., you'll be meeting me." Don't we all need a place where we are embraced just as we are and held to who we say we want to become? That brings me to the second dimension of authentic community I wanted to highlight. Authentic community is the place where we reclaim our true identity. It's the place where we shift from taking our identity from our trauma and the results of our trauma and begin taking our identity from our truest self, which is love. One of the most loving people I know is a man named John. John suffered a lot of trauma as a child. As a young adult, his aching for belonging landed him in a violent gang. He covered his body in tattoos, proclaiming his identity as a member of that gang. Eventually, it was methamphetamines, not a rival gang, that beat him nearly to death. He struggled through the door of our cafe, so weighted down by shame, he couldn't look us in the eye. But he kept showing up. The warm hugs, the laughter, the opportunities to serve and to connect, the delicious meals served on brightly colored fiestaware. It all reminded him of his true worth, his true identity. One day, after showing up day in and day out for 9 months, he said to me, "I turned my gun over to the police this morning." "What gun?" I asked. "The one that's been strapped to the bottom of my leg underneath my pants every single day that I've been coming here." And then he went on to explain, "I'm learning to live from love instead of fear." I wonder what some of us may need to turn over in order to live more fully from love instead of fear. Maybe an excessive need for control, or maybe an excessive need for approval, or maybe a need to numb our pain with more and more of what doesn't work and will never satisfy our deepest longing. One thing's for sure. If we are to make that identity shift that John made, we need some intentional practice of connecting with that place of unconditional love in us. That place is not just in some of us. That place is in all of us. And that practice might be prayer, meditation, movement, creative expression, time in nature, silence, service, or simply being fully present to the moment we're living. By the way, this is not rocket science. This is neuroscience and spiritual awakening. These practices literally change our brains and awaken our spirits. Which brings me to the final thing I wanted to say about authentic community. Authentic community is the place where all involved discover and offer our gifts. Discovering and offering our gifts brings us purpose beyond ourselves. Hasn't that been your experience? When I think of discovering and offering our gifts, I always think of Jenny. Jenny was sexually abused by her older brother and became pregnant at age 14. Her parents sent her to a home for unwed mothers where she was exposed to an array of drugs. Jenny spent the next 12 soul-scorching years addicted to heroin. As she began to heal from her trauma, she began to ask, what gift do I have to give? One day, she burst into my office and she announced, as a heroin addict, I was awesome at finding veins. I'm going to become a phlebotomist. And sure enough, she enrolled in a medical technician's program, and she was rated best in her class at finding veins and drawing blood. You know, sometimes the gift that we have to offer is somehow related to our deepest pain. I find myself wondering all the time, what if we as a nation truly understood that addiction is a symptom of trauma? What if, instead of incarcerating and abandoning individuals suffering from trauma, we create authentic communities in every neighborhood, every town, every city across the U.S. and beyond? What if everyone had a place to belong, to become, to begin to know the wonder of their true worth? Thank you so much for listening.